All right, we all know the story, right? Humanity gets kicked out of the Garden of Eden. But what if that wasn't the end of the story? What if there's actually a hidden map, a way back in? Today, we're diving into a really fascinating interpretation of how you might just return to paradise.
So, it all starts with this one verse from Genesis. And it sets up a pretty big problem, doesn't it? You've got these cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth guarding the way to the tree of life. So, how in the world is anyone supposed to get past that?
So, Section 1. The quest begins. The closed gates of Eden. The source material we're digging into today sees this whole setup not as some permanent keep-out sign, but, well, more like the start of a quest. The obstacles, they're not just roadblocks, they're symbols, they're clues we need to decode.
And to even begin to figure out the way forward, we first have to understand what's really blocking the path. Because according to this interpretation, we're talking about something much, much deeper than just an angel with a very big, very hot sword. It's a spiritual checkpoint.
Okay, let's get into it. Section 2. Decoding the barrier, the flaming sword and the veil. The argument here is that the guards of Eden aren't literal figures you'd meet. No, they're powerful symbols for some pretty major divine principles.
First up, you've got the cherubim. And the idea here is that they aren't just guarding, a garden with some nice trees. They're guarding the very throne and presence of God himself. So returning to Eden, that really means approaching the divine. And the cherubim, they represent that awesome, overwhelming holiness you have to pass through to get there.
And then you have the flaming sword. Now, this is a really fascinating idea. It's interpreted as God's commandment, the divine law acting as a sword of judgment. Think of it like this perfect, unbending standard that everyone who approaches is measured against. So, here's the really crucial part. The commandment itself, it's neutral. It's like a double-edged sword, right? It can bring life or it can bring judgment. It all depends on what you do. For those who obey, it's the path to the tree of life. But for those who don't, well, it becomes the very sword that bars the way.
And finally, there's this internal barrier, what the source calls the veil. Now, if you think about the ancient temple, there was that huge thick curtain that separated the holiest part from everything else. That's the idea here. This veil is our own human nature, our desires, the stuff that separates us from the divine. And according to this view, that veil of the self, it has to be torn to pass through.
Okay, Section 3, the way forward, following the ultimate guide. So if the barrier is divine judgment on one side and our own nature on the other, how do you get through? Well, the source lays out a very specific path.
And that path forward, according to the source, is the cross. The idea is that the crucifixion isn't just a historical event. It's the ultimate blueprint for how to overcome the self, how to tear that veil. It's presented as this personal path that anyone can follow to get past the cherubim and that flaming sword.
This whole thing is described as a kind of spiritual gauntlet, and it breaks down into 3 key stages. First, self-sacrifice. The old self, the sinful self, has to be put to death, like a sacrifice on an altar. Step 2 is purification, a total cleansing process, symbolized by things like baptism. And only then comes the final step, passing judgment. Only this new, purified self can actually face that flaming sword of God's word and not be, consumed by it. It's a complete transformation.
Now here's where it gets really cool. Section 4, Echoes in History, Ancient Footprints on the Path. The source sees this exact same pattern showing up again and again throughout the Old Testament. It's like finding ancient footprints, all leading in the same direction, back toward paradise. Just look at the pattern here. Abraham, Jacob, Joshua. Whenever they're journeying to the Promised Land, it's always from east to west. Now, that is super significant because it perfectly mirrors the path a priest would take into the ancient tabernacle. You'd enter from the east, the direction of the sunrise, of new beginnings, and move west, toward the sunset, toward the final destination, getting deeper and deeper into the presence of God.
And this table here, it really connects all the dots. The source basically argues that these huge historical events, like the Passover, were like physical dress rehearsals for an individual's spiritual journey. The Passover lamb, that prefigures the crucifixion of the self. Crossing the Jordan River, that symbolizes baptism and purification. Even Joshua's encounter with God's commander is seen as that final test, that moment of passing divine judgment. It's all one big, connected story, pointing to the same path. Which brings us to our next section, Section 5, the destination, Eden Reimagined. So after you pass the guards, you follow the map, where does this journey actually end? Well, the destination is a lot more than just a garden.
So get this.
The final destination isn't just one place. It's seen as three in one: the Garden of Eden, the Holy of Holies in the Temple, and the New Jerusalem. They're all viewed as the same thing, the ultimate state of being in the direct, unfiltered presence of God. So returning to Eden really means entering that final, innermost sanctuary.
And who actually reaches this destination? Well, according to the text, it's for those who have completed the entire journey. We're talking about the martyrs, the faithful witnesses, the ones who have proven their devotion and successfully made it through that spiritual gauntlet we talked about earlier. They're even described symbolically as the bride of Christ.
So the ultimate prize, the big reward, isn't just about eating a physical fruit from a tree. It's about achieving a perfect, eternal union with God's will. And in the end, you see how it all comes full circle? The tree of life and the flaming sword, which is the commandment, they become one and the same. Obedience is life.
And that brings this whole complex theological map to a close, leaving us with a pretty big question to think about. If this interpretation is right, if life really is a journey, not back to a physical place, but into a new state of being, it makes you wonder, what does the very first step on that path look like?